Welcome to our Gifts of God program, Sunday Talk. It's been a week of paying attention to this section in the Course in Miracles. It's a supplement. It's called Psychotherapy, Purpose, Process, and Practice. And at first I kind of shied away from those supplements, but there are two. There's that one, and then there's the other one, Song of Prayer, and I think they're very significant. And we've been very careful over the years to not call ourselves psychotherapists per se. You know, like, first of all, because that word is pretty charged, and also out in the world, so to speak, there are quote unquote licensed psychotherapists, and they go through all kinds of licensing. And we didn't want to get into any conflict about calling ourselves psychotherapists because we haven't been through those systems. Sandra's the mother of rebirthing and has been doing that for 50 years now, since 1974. And that has been her modus operandi of healing. And it's been, in our opinion, quite more advanced than what traditional psychotherapy has offered people, because it's an integration not just of the mind, but of the cellular memory that we hold through the breathing. We can release that. So we've been very careful not to call ourselves psychotherapists. However, when you read this supplement on psychotherapy, it's not like anything that is defined out there in the world of psychotherapy. First of all, it gets right to the crux of the matter, and it said all illness is mental illness. Even physical symptoms in your body or physical quote unquote diseases originate in the mind. And then all illness has some unforgiveness involved. And I think those two things were very interesting to see from this supplement. So what does that mean? If all illness is unforgiveness, that would have to imply guilt, right? So if you haven't forgiven, then that means you're holding on in yourself to some kind of guilt, or you're projecting it onto somebody else. You know, like all attack thoughts or all anger would have to be some kind of guilt projected outward onto somebody else. And then, you know, guilt projected inward, well, that's just, you know, we all know about that, how certain things we've done and over the years we hold kind of regret or guilt about that. And all of that either projected out or suppressed and projected in, it's still very destructive to ourselves. And that is the root of illness or the root of sickness. And we have to address that. So that was one thing that was very clear in this supplement of Psychotherapy, Purpose, Process, and Practice, is that all illness is mental illness, originates, and then all illness has some kind of guilt or unforgiveness involved. So that was one. Then the next thing that was very unlike psychotherapy in the world was saying how the patient is actually the therapist of the therapist. So the patient is going to come and show the therapist what they need to forgive in themselves. Okay, so they're just a clear kind of a projection of the issues that we all have going on, right? And if it's unforgiveness, then it's also going to be something that the therapist has to see in himself and make those corrections in himself. And to the degree he's made those corrections or done that forgiveness work, that's the degree he can help the quote unquote patient also do the forgiveness work on themselves. But it's always a mirror. So who is the patient and who is the therapist? Like it was saying, well, they're both for each other. So it's a holy relationship, in other words. And even though it's, set in this kind of professional therapy realm of, a patient coming to a person who's the therapist or the practitioner, it's still a holy relationship. And to the degree that it is a holy relationship is the degree it will heal, because both need to more or less surrender to kind of a higher power, a higher energy, a higher guidance. And even there were some points in this essay where it was saying like the Christ has to be invoked. Like the therapist has to see the Christ in the patient. And now to the degree the therapist can do that, the patient will have a transformation, because to see the Christ in the patient means you see that person without their problems. You see those people without their mistakes that they've made in their mind. It's like, yes, you see the mistakes they made, but you look past that and you're looking at their perfection, not at their errors. And that is what you need the Christ to do. And as a therapist, that's what we're always doing. When people come to us for a rebirthing session or liberation breathing session, yes, we are trying to find where they're stuck in their negative thoughts, but we're also trying to transmute those negative thoughts and mirror back to them, the positive thoughts that's going to heal whatever that is. Whatever their unforgiveness is, we give them the positive thoughts to heal that. So in effect, we're seeing them in their higher self, which is what the Christ always does. He sees us already healed, in other words. Like if the mind is the source of the problem, he's going to see your real mind, your God-created mind. And that's what he's going to mirror back to you as a therapist, or for us as a practitioner. And I think we all have to get into this mode, because we're all students and we're all teachers. That's another way you could put it. Therapist, patient, teacher, student. So we're all students of the Course in Miracles, but we're also, because we're students, we're also teachers of the Course in Miracles, because people are going to be in our lives where these principles are going to be tested, given an opportunity to be applied, which then makes us the teacher. The whole thing it's very dynamic. And I think that's what I got from reading this and talking. We did quite a few podcasts on these. We're not quite finished with it. There's one more section. But I think it was very useful to look at this psychotherapy, purpose, process, and practice. And it gave me a new insight into that. So then all week we've been thinking about healing. And what does it mean, spiritual healing? Because we just wrote this book, right? Revolutionary Spiritual Healing. So we're a bit accountable right now for those words. And we have to kind of, look at that. But also we've been really giving attention to spiritual healing. What does that involve? What do we need to do to be more of a catalyst for that? What are the actions we need to take to get the most out of that? So in the evening, I guess we always had a very strong morning spiritual practice. we would get together and read something from the Course, talk about that. We have our own little prayer process in the morning, but we weren't so focused in a conscious way about our evening practice. But now we are. So what we're doing every evening after, all the work's done and all the TV shows are done, and around about 8:30, we sit in front of the altar to the Divine Mother, and we just sit quiet for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, and see if we receive anything. So first we read this little prayer to the Divine Mother and invoke the Divine Mother and say, we're inviting you into our hearts and our life, and et cetera, et cetera. And we'd like any guidance that you want to give us. And then we sit for 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less, and then see if something comes to us. And also we're asking for supernatural things to happen. Like, look, Divine Mother, if you can, whatever you need to give us to have better health, please do it. We're asking for that. We're open for that. We're requesting that. And so we've been a lot more conscious about that process of asking. So that's the one thing we're doing differently now as far as our spiritual practice. We're adding that to the evening, which we weren't so much before, but now we are. So now we have a practice in the morning and we have a practice in the evening. And I think that's really good. When I think about it, when in those years where I went to Tara Singh's foundation, he always gave a talk in the morning. That was the first thing. As soon as we all got up, we got, our showers and ready at 7 a.m. in the morning, he would always be in the prayer room giving some kind of a presentation. And then that would also happen around 5:30, 6 o'clock. He would give an evening talk in the prayer room. So when I think about it, he bracketed his day similarly. He had a serious concentration in the morning, and he had a serious concentration in the evening. And I think that's something that we should all look at and maybe incorporate that. I know Sandra and I now are more with it, especially in the evening. And I think that would help us a lot stay on track. So last night we were sitting there and doing our meditation. And it really came to me very strongly, these last 20 lessons in the workbook, they're the only lessons that are in the part 2 that are more than 10 syllables for one thing. They're longer. They're like, I think, let's see, 341 is, begins lessons that are 20 syllables. Then there are ones that are 30. And then there's one in the last 10 that's 40. And they're also more about healing and more about making this connection with the Holy Spirit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about them, especially the last 5. It says, sickness is but another name for sin. Healing is but another name for God. And the miracle is thus a call to him, meaning God. Okay, so I wanted to look at that. Sickness is but another name for sin. Now, the Course says sin doesn't exist, really, nor does guilt. We think it does, but it doesn't. But nevertheless, we think it does, right? So sickness is another name for sin which means there has to always be guilt involved with sickness. And it's the same thing that this psychotherapy supplement was saying, that all sickness involves unforgiveness. Well, then it would have to follow that all sickness involves guilt, because unforgiveness is just guilt that you haven't forgiven, right? It's the guilt you haven't got off of. So guilt has to always be present. So when it says sickness is but another name for sin, well, that would make sense, because when we think we're sinners, we also think we're guilty. And guilt, sickness, sin, they all go together. So that's the sickness, and that's in the mind. So the healing has to start in the mind, because somewhere we thought we separated from our source, and then we have all these thoughts of separation, guilt, fear, anger, all that stuff. And you add all that up, and it makes you sick. And eventually you'll die from it, right? It'll kill you, all those negative thoughts. And we call that sin. And then the church adds more mental mass to it and says, well, not only did you think these thoughts, but you were born that way. So it like puts this weight on it, like you were originally a sinner all the way back, So like this is a major thing to get over. And then these lessons, these last 5, if we really paid attention, we could get over it in like 5 days, right? If we really understood the depth of these lessons. So it says sickness is but another name for sin, which means, okay, there has to be guilt, there has to be unforgiveness, that sort of thing involved with sickness. Then it says healing is but another name for God, and that the miracle is a call to God. So God doesn't make our errors real, but God has provided the miracle that can heal us. So, well, what's the miracle? The miracle is seeing that there is no sin, there's nothing we did that can't be forgiven and absolved, and that there really is no guilt. There's no sin, there's no guilt. Your mistakes weren't even made at the level of your true self. They were only made at the ego level, and you're not an ego. So therefore, the mistakes have no consequences in reality. But in order to see that, you have to have the miracles. You have to have the insights. You have to have the depth of new perception or corrected perception. So then, okay, so you see, okay, my problems are mental. My problems are, I have not forgiven myself. I still retain some guilt, either projected out on someone else or on myself. And that's where the problem is, right? So then, okay, if I can ask God, healing is a call to God to give me the miracle. And the miracle would undo all that. That's the purpose of the miracle. The miracle mostly is a corrective tool. You don't need miracles in heaven. You only need miracles in hell where you've made mistakes, right? And you've got pain and suffering. That's where you need the miracles. Well, what's the miracle going to do? It's going to undo the thoughts that produce the pain and suffering. It's going to undo the sickness that is another form of, quote, sin, guilt, that kind of thing. So the miracle undoes the guilt. It undoes the sickness. And it's corrective. And it's a call to God. So then the next one says, truth answers every call we make to God. Responding first with miracles. Okay, so the miracle would be showing you that your mistakes were only made at the ego level, and you're not an ego, and your mistakes didn't have any real consequence, and you're innocent anyway. And even if you did make a mistake and you were conscious of it, you're still innocent. You know, we have this wonderful affirmation, even though I made a mistake, I completely love and accept myself. So even if you made a mistake, you're still innocent. So therefore, there's no guilt. You just correct yourself. So truth answers every call we make to God, responding first with miracles, which would be the corrections, and then returning unto us to be itself. Well, truth, heaven returns to us when we've corrected all of our mistakes, right? So then we don't need the miracles. Truth comes back. We're in that state of peace, joy, no problems. That's truth. That's the heaven state. Truth answers every call we make to God, responding first with miracles, which are the corrections, and then returning us to the heaven state. Then it's interesting. It says, no call to God can be unheard nor left unanswered. And of this I can be sure, his answer is the one I really want. Okay, so when you make the call to God, you're saying, okay, got this problem, got a pain, got something in my life not working, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just something not producing pure joy in your life. Could be a physical symptom, could be something in your work, could be a relationship problem. All right, so you make the call to God. No call to God can be unheard. So if you're really making the call from your heart, and it's true, it's going to be heard and it's going to be responded to. It's not possible that God would ignore you, or that energy, whatever you want to call that energy of healing. It's not possible that that would not hear you. No call to God can be unheard or left unanswered. So not only are you going to be heard, but you're going to be given the answer, whatever that is. And it's probably in some form of clarity, forgiveness, something you see that you were holding guilt about and you have to let it go. You're innocent, whatever, even though you made a mistake, you're still innocent. Some kind of correction like that. That would be the miracle given. No call to God can be unheard or left unanswered. And then of this, I'm really sure. God's answer is the one I really want. I don't want my answers. I want God's answer, because God's going to totally restore me. And in fact, God doesn't even see the mistakes that I made. You know, that's Christ's vision we were talking about a little earlier. Christ doesn't even see the mistakes that we made. And as healers, that's what we have to do. If we're going to really be healers, we have to see the people come to us without their mistakes, but also we see whatever their mistake is, we probably made that mistake at some point in our life ourselves. And that's how we can look beyond it, because we've already forgiven it somewhat in ourselves. All right, so now it says, God's answer is the one I really want. Okay, at least we got that far. And any request I make is going to be answered. No call to God can be unheard. So the answer is there. Now the next lesson, it's like maybe my favorite lesson in the whole course, and it's also the longest. It's 40 syllables long. It says, God's answer is some form of peace. Then it says, all pain is healed and all misery replaced with joy. All prison doors are opened, and all sin is understood as merely a mistake. God's answer is some form of peace. All pain is healed, all misery replaced with joy, all prison doors are open, and all sin is understood as merely a mistake. So that's the same as saying, well, mistakes can be corrected, and there's no guilt in a mistake. If you were, a first grader and I was the teacher, and you came and you said 2 + 2 is 5, and I said, no, 2 + 2 is 4. Here's 2 apples and 2 apples, and they make 4 apples. There's no guilt in that. There's no guilt in correction. In true correction, there's no guilt. Now, we've been conditioned to feel guilty about mistakes, right? So, and guilt and sin go together. So if you made a really big mistake and you're guilty, then you're also a sinner. And then that's where sickness comes in, because all guilt demands punishment. And sickness is just a form of punishment, punishing yourself for some guilt you're holding on to. So this says, well, all sin is understood as just a mistake. And all mistakes can be corrected without consequence, without, the additional consequence of guilt put on them. So look at it again. God's answer is some form of peace. All pain is healed, all misery replaced with joy, all prison doors are opened, and all sin is understood as just a mistake. It's so beautiful. Now, all right, how much faith do we have that's going to work for us? That's the crux. How much faith do you have that that energy of healing is really going to come in and correct your whatever it is? Now, you might have to look at, okay, we do this very well. In Saunders' new book, The Revolutionary Spiritual Healing, there's this chapter 20 called The Ultimate Truth Process. And I mean, if you got the book for only that one chapter, it'd be worth it. The ultimate truth process can be applied to any situation, any condition in your body, any condition in a relationship, any condition you have in your life that's something not working. Could be money, could be anything not supremely happy. Well, it starts with this. You just say, the thought I had that made up this, whatever it is, symptom in your body. The thought I have that made up this pain in my shoulder is, and then see what your subconscious shares. You have to get at those, you have to kind of uncover those subconscious thoughts that are underlying whatever the condition is. All right, so you get those out on the table. You should pay attention whatever it's going to share. It's usually accurate. Especially if you approach it in a kind of a humble, honest, sincere way, your subconscious will bring up something that is helpful to look at. So we've been working on that. We've been working on clearing the past lives. Also, we worked for months on any guilt that we had from our own families, anything we did, said. So I looked at some of the things with my sister, not just this recent interaction, but from my childhood. What kind of interactions did we have as children? It wasn't so good, so I was probably holding a lot of guilt about that. So we've been looking at where are we hanging on to guilt? And this truth process helps us do that. And then mostly the confession, once you got that out and you get it up to the surface and you verbalize it, it's there. It's like it can be part of the atonement then. So somewhere in the psychotherapy part, it said, well, it's not enough just to see that unforgiveness is the problem. What's going to heal you is the forgiveness. It seems kind of simple, right? Like, why did Jesus have to say that? But we can get stuck on thinking that when we see the cause of the problem, that's all the way. But it's not all the way. Okay, the cause of the problem is unforgiveness. However, have you forgiven? That's the real crux of it. Have you actually done the forgiving? It's not enough just to see, oh yeah, I see the source of the problem is I had this thought, or I had this memory from a past life of when I condemned some people, and I'm holding some guilt about that, and then it's manifesting in this life in the guilt of this physical issue. Okay, you see the source of it, but then, all right, are you forgiving it? This psychotherapy supplement was saying this is where you need the Christ. So it's pretty far-fetched to say, to be a great psychotherapist, you need to have a relationship with the Christ. You know, I don't think you could ever say that if you were studying psychology in Harvard or Princeton or Oxford or, you know, Heidelberg. If you were in the psychology department and you said, well, in order to be a top psychotherapist, I have to have a relationship with the Christ consciousness, I think they'd probably kick you out of the department. And this is probably why Dr. Schuchman and William Thetford had to do this work in the back room of Columbia, right? Because if their colleagues found out what they were doing, they probably would have been laughed out of the department. But this is what Jesus is saying true psychotherapy is. If you don't invoke the Christ, which Christ's vision is he looks beyond your errors, right? And sees you in a totally forgiven state. This is what it says is necessary for the healing to take place. And if you're not doing that, then the answer doesn't come. The spiritual healing energy doesn't come. It's like a disconnect. And that channel is opened up through this invocation of the Christ consciousness. And without that, the channel is closed. Channel's not open. So how does the forgiveness actually take place? Yeah, it's not enough for me to see where the problem came from. My guilt, my blame, my fear, my whatever mistake I made. Okay, you confess that, I made the mistake. But now what's got to happen for this mistake to be transmuted and forgiven? Well, that's where the Christ consciousness is necessary. No call to God can be unheard or left unanswered. And of this, I'm really sure God's answer is the one I really want. Well, what's God's answer? God's answer is Christ's vision. God's answer is turning water to wine, turning guilt to innocence, turning fear into love. It's an alchemy that we have to master here. And without that relationship with the Christ consciousness, we're not going to have spiritual healing. But with it, miracles can happen. God's answer is some form of peace. Well, peace would be free of problems, right? Whatever the problem is you're bringing to the table to solve, or whatever the sickness is that you're bringing to the table to solve, if you truly are at that state of peace, you don't have that issue anymore. It's been healed. God's answer is some form of peace. Well, peace doesn't have problems. And if you say, well, I've got peace, but I got all these problems, you're a liar. You're only pretending to be in peace. Peace is like neutral. empty, nothing going on, no problem, no pain, no suffering, no this, no that. It's like one step farther, you're into heaven and beyond physicality, but you're pretty close to that in a state of peace. And then he can say, well, okay, God's answer is some form of peace. All pain is healed, all misery replaced with joy, all prison doors are opened. You're not trapped or bound or by anything. You're not limited by anything. All prison doors are open. That's the metaphor. That means you're not trapped in any situation. You're not a prisoner of any situation. You're free. All prison doors are open. You're liberated. And there's no sin. Sin is just recognized as a mistake that can be corrected. And you've corrected it. There you go. There's spiritual healing right there. But how did you get there? Only Christ's vision could give you that. Only Christ's vision could give you the truth of that lesson. God's answer is some form of peace. All pain is healed. All misery replaced with joy. All prison doors are opened. And all sin is just a mistake. Well, that is Christ's vision right there. That's Christ's consciousness in that one lesson. You master that lesson, and you've mastered the whole Course in Miracles. That's probably the most healing lesson in the whole book. You get to that point, and those 5 lessons, 356 to 360, those 5 lessons, that's a whole course in spiritual healing in five lessons. It's just incredible. I've known those lessons were really powerful but I haven't been able to talk about them like I am now. And I think what's happening is these evening sessions Sandra and I are doing in front of the altar to the Divine Mother, they're giving me much more clarity on the action of the miracle and the action of the Christ consciousness in us. We've got to make the contact with that and also be willing to apply it to whatever situation we have. So right now for Sandra and I, it's health. It's like our health. We're applying it to that. And so it's been activating. It's been requiring that we put some attention where we weren't putting attention. And you may find that too. There may be an area of your life where you have to give it another kind of attention that you weren't giving it before. And yeah. I was telling Sandra that, I don't want to stop short. We've both been students of the Course in Miracles all these years, right? And I think it holds something out to us or anybody who's studying it. But we don't want to stop short, and we don't want to pretend that we have something we already have. And I think that's an important point. Like, there's this kind of famous dialogue, this poet Rumi, we all know Rumi, but he had this teacher, and the teacher was somebody we don't know, Shams. They called him Shams. And there was this question that was put. And Rumi was asked by his teacher, well, who's greater, this one saint or Muhammad? And the one saint was asked the question about Allah or God, and he said, well, isn't God great? And God is just so fantastic, and we can just be in bliss and all this. And then Muhammad said, yes, but we don't fully know God. And it made Muhammad greater because he was open to the possibility of revelation coming in a greater way. And I think we have to approach that with the Course. We should never assume we know. And then the possibility for miracles is greater because we're coming from that receptivity. Because as soon as you pretend that you know it, you don't really know it. But when you're open and you say, well, the possibilities of the divine are infinite, and we're open to receive that. And I don't know that. But then you're an open vessel. You see the difference? Like if we assume, oh, because we've studied the Course for 30 years, we must know it. No. We always say, well, until you're walking on water and raising the dead, you've still got something to clear. Okay, we do. We do have something to clear. And then they asked Dr. Schuchman, well, is the Course in Miracles for this time period? She said, probably not. But there might be a few people that can get it. Well, I always like to think I was maybe one of those persons that could possibly get it, you know? And it has to be possible. Jesus wouldn't give us this Course in Miracles if it wasn't possible to go all the way and rise into Christ consciousness. And I don't want to stop short of that. And I don't want to pretend I'm there either. You know, I want to hold out the possibility that we can ascend into Christ consciousness. And I also want to be brutally honest with myself that if I'm not there, I'm not there. And that I'm not going to pretend to be there as a teacher or as a presenter if I'm not. And so I think that was always the energy of Tara Singh. His purpose was to undo anything that we were deceiving ourselves with. And sometimes it got rigorous, and sometimes you'd feel like, oh, this is a mighty long road. Am I ever going to get there? And that's okay. Yes, it's a road that the ego wants to look at as mighty long, but there are these moments when you step out of that struggle and the clarity comes, and there it is. And this is what I was experiencing with these lessons. Sickness is a form of sin. Healing is a call to God. And the miracle is there. And the miracle is like, belongs to us. We're entitled to them. It even says that. Lesson 77, I am entitled to miracles. How much clearer could you get than that? Like, okay, we study this Course in Miracles, but are we receiving the miracles? Are we opening the channel? Are we letting in the Christ consciousness that can give us the miracles? I am entitled to miracles. Well, I'm going to hold Jesus to that. All right, that's what we're sitting in front of the altar asking for, and this is what we're going to receive. And I don't know, maybe we need to learn a few things. Right diet, right this, right that. You know, maybe that's all part of it. But I'm here and I'm showing up and I want to be guided, and this is the problem and this is what we need the solution for. And we're entitled to the miracles. And I think we have to demand that. We have to make that demand. We're entitled to miracles. And we're also not pretending to know what we don't know. And here we are. So let's receive it. Whatever your problem is in life, there's got to be the miracle. There's got to be the answer, the solution, the liberation, the freedom. We're entitled to that, especially as students of the course. And this has to be spiritual healing. You know, these are coming from dimensions that are outside the natural, supernatural. So this is what we're exploring. Sandra and I are exploring these things mostly because we just wrote this book, Revolutionary Spiritual Healing, and we want to walk our talk and be on it, you know. And maybe that's also why, okay, you just wrote this book. Now, here's a test. Can you handle this one? Yeah, here's a test. I'm excited, and I'm also, I'm feeling really good about entering into this podcast about the text. I've never seriously approached the text. I have read it multiple times. But, you know, even Tara Singh didn't talk that much about, there were a few sections in the text he discussed, but mostly it was different lessons that he went over. So the text is like really deep, and most of us, it's a little bit daunting, you know, like even people that have studied the course for years. When it comes to the text, you've got to read it 3 or 4 times over and over again. And even then, sometimes the language is tricky. It's a very daunting task to start digging into the text. And I think we're ready for it, but it's also a little bit scary. Yeah. But I think we'll just get into it and see where it goes. And I think we'll be fine. But it's going to be like this, you know, it's going to be like holding us accountable and taking us another step. And it's like we not only do we believe there's a Christ consciousness because we're students of the course, but we're at a point where we need the contact with it. We need the actual relationship with this Christ consciousness. And we're going to need the miracles, because what we're going to have to face is going to need miracles. You see what I mean? Like whatever life is going to throw at us, we're going to need miracles to navigate those things. And we may not be able to solve those problems with conventional wisdom, you know, but only through this Christ consciousness are we going to get the answers. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this today, and those last 5 lessons. Well, actually, there's the last 5 are that lesson, this holy instant, what I give to you, be you in charge, for I would follow you, certain that your direction gives me peace. That's the last 5 lessons. But these 5 just before that, 356 to 360. Yeah, look at those quite carefully, because I think that's where we need to go in our process of healing. Well, that's it for today. And I never quite know where these are going to go, but I knew I needed to talk about those lessons that came to me last night in the meditation, and that's what Sandra and I are looking at. And we're going to finish up this psychotherapy this week, and then probably move into the text I don't know if Sandra may want to do this song of prayer, but I'm kind of wanting to leave that for the very last thing after we've done the text, actually. So that could be down the line. I think we're going to get into the text right after this psychotherapy. Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining. And I'm having a good time putting these up on YouTube. So hopefully those will be good. I don't want to say calling cards or promotional, but if people do listen to those, they might be inspired to join the Gifts of God next year. So I'm looking forward even to next year, because I mean, probably most of next year we're going to be in the text, you guys. So I'm just preparing you now, because it's going to take more than a year to get through the text. It's vast. Yeah. So, but you know how we work. We work very methodically. We go lesson by lesson. So we're going to approach the text like that too, chapter by chapter, section by section. We're not going to jump around. We're just going to start in the beginning and keep going. Yeah. So, and who knows how long that'll take? I don't know. I have no idea. But it'll be a good journey. Well, hey, I look forward to seeing you every week. And and if you have questions or anything, please write to us during the week. We can connect. Yeah. Have a good Sunday.